Thank you for welcoming me. It's a great pleasure to be in Dusseldorf today with you all.
Hello, meine Damen und Herren. Wir freuen uns, Sie herzlich begrüßen zu dürfen, und we will talk in English. How come we both Frenchmen, we both from Lyon, in Germany, speaking English? Well,
this is Europe, with or without Brexit.
So you see, here is the first political comment about music in Europe, probably.
We're not talking about Brexit.
Right.
No.
I am a psychologist, and as a psychologist I'm interested to know more about people. I'm sure that you know everything about Jean-Michel Jarre, about the labels, about the records. I would like to speak about you, who you are, where you come from, what are your ideas, your aims, and I would like to go back a little bit in the past to know, to understand better who you are, where you come from, and I would like to go back in the early days. I read that your grandfather was an oboe player. He was also an inventor, and I would like to know how did he influence your musical career, because I read that at the beginning you had some influence.
Yes, actually my grandfather was quite a unique human being. He had two brains like all of us, but he was using them in a quite specific way, because as you said, he was a musician, oboe player, but he was also an engineer. He created one of the first mixing desks before the war, and also one of the first turntable with batteries that you would bring for picnics, with the cover, with the speaker in the cover. It's the grandfather of the iPod, actually, and so he obviously he had a very big influence on my work and on my taste also when I was a child, because of this kind of interest for music and also for technology.
Now, talking about invention, talking about music, we will come later to these topics. You said, when we spoke once, you said that very early you started with music and with piano. Who told you that that would be the perfect instrument for you? Who said piano, that is something that you would like to play?
Actually, nobody said that. I mean, my mom encouraged me to take some piano lessons, and I hated it. I hated my teacher, first of all. She was a kind of sadistic person, I mean, hitting my fingers and even this kind of process. And then I was even writing on the walls of my bedroom, I hate piano. So it was not the ideal beginning for what I was to do later on. And then I went back on that with a different teacher a year later. Then I played in rock bands and playing guitar also. But and the electronic music came at quite an early stage because of my grandfather giving me one of the first telefunken to tape, two tracks tape recorder. And I was at a very early stage interested by twisting and processing the sounds I was doing with the keyboard or with the guitar, far before even I've been involved in electroacoustic or electronic music.
Do you recall the first concert that you visited?
Yes, I mean, my contact with music has been quite diversified, because I remember that, I mean, a few things, briefly. One of the first concerts with this great, fantastic Arabic singer called Kulthum, and I was so impressed because she went once in France, and she sang 2 songs in almost 3 hours. It was only 2 songs of 1 hour and a half, or like a movie. And I was so impressed by this kind of different conception of music that I remember that I went out and I said to my mom, I want to marry this woman. And so that was one of my first contact with, different kind of approach of music and sound. And also another very strong experience for me, as you know, because we talked about that together. I mean, it's my mom was a great figure in the French resistance, and I will go back to this later on. After the war, her best friend was opened the most famous jazz club in Paris called Le Chat-qui-Pêche in Rue de la Huchette in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, and where she welcomed lots of artists I had no idea about because I was 6 years old, 7 years old, like Don Cherry, John Coltrane, Archie Shepp, and Chet Baker. And I remember that I was just a little kid when my mom was visiting a friend during weekends, and I was going to the cellar where these guys were rehearsing in the afternoon. And for my 8th birthday, I remember that Chet Baker, I had no idea who this guy was. He was just, for me, playing trumpet. And he sat me on the upright piano and he played for me for 5 minutes for my birthday. And this is probably my first emotion and physical contact with sound. What does it mean, sound? I mean, as a musician, we are. It's a very special business, doing music, because you are dealing with the invisible. You are dealing with making the air vibrating, and depending on the air vibrating from your instrument to your ears, and depending on how you make this air vibrating, you can create boredom, you can create excitement. The desire of having dancing to the end of the night, or being sad, and it's just a very subtle way of making the air vibrating in a specific way. And I had this kind of consciousness when Chet Baker was playing like this at the distance. And each time I'm remembering this, I still feel the air of his instruments on my chest, and it's a very strong emotional recollection about what sound is all about.
I can feel it, and I'm sure you can feel it also, the way you talk about that experience. It must have been a very, very profound feeling that you could really felt inside yourself. And if we move a little bit further, just a few years, you founded a band. And you were a sort of a little entrepreneur in your early age. To be part of a band means to be a team player, but also to found a band means you need some sort of leadership. How was it?
I don't know, to make things at the right level, the name of the band was called the Dustbins. So it was called a kind of punk thing where you had actually no leader, or maybe a constant fight for who could be the leader.
So it's like in politics.
Exactly, that's right. And but that has been something what was very important to me, because Germany and France, we have this heritage of classical music, and I studied classical music, but at the same time I have been really lucky also to be involved in the rock scene, or local rock scene in my district, my street. Nothing big, but giving this kind of feel of the importance of the street, the importance of popular music, what it is. Pop music, what does it mean? And pop music, what does it mean in our countries in Europe? It's not exactly the same than in America, obviously.
We move a little bit further about your apartment and your kitchen, who was a sort of recording studio, more or less, in your first apartment. How come that you created your first recording studio at home? I'm sure you had no money, but to do it at home, what does it mean?
first, everybody loves cooking. And we have the arrogance to think that we are doing the best cooking in the world.
That's true.
Typically French, but in case of Lyon, it's true. You know? and also, I used to. So my first home studio has been made in a kitchen, and actually, I used to call the place on stage you will see tonight as my kitchen, also my own kitchen, with surrounded by instruments. So the concept of kitchen is pretty important to me. And to go back to what Louis was just saying, actually, my first. I was working with great French rock artists, I mean, producing albums, but I had always had in the back of my mind, I mean, trying to create this kind of music, electronic music, creating a bridge between experimentation and melodies and pop music. And it was not possible to do that in the serious studio of that time. I mean, of that time, in the real studio the studio was, as you probably know, 2 rooms separated by a glass, and the god is the sound engineer behind the glass, and we are the fish in the aquarium. The fish is the musicians behind, and depending entirely on what the guy is going to record and how he's going to make our sounds. And I didn't like that at all. I wanted to control the mix and the recording process as it has to be in the electronic music processing, which is different than recording a rock band or recording instruments. So I think I founded one of the first, if not the first, home studio in France, and that was something totally unusual. And when you look back today, what is unusual for a musician, especially in electronic music, is to go to a studio like in the old days, because the regular way of doing music these days for most of us is actually to do music in our home studio, in our own environment.
One could assume that you are a control freak, but I think it's not just about control, it's about something different, right? What is the demands that you are imposing upon yourself? I think it has to do with quality.
Yeah, I think everybody can understand that in this room. I mean, in our lives we are fighting constantly between the chaos and order. And when you are achieving something which is, I mean, you could be an architect, an engineer, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be anybody out there doing pastries or whatever. I mean, you have to be in control of what you're doing. So what a lot of people are considering as being a control freak is just doing just the ambition of succeeding what you have in mind. And I would say that if I'm here today, after a long time already, it's because I think that for me, the creative process is probably a mixing of frustration and hope. The frustration that what you've done is not good enough for yourself, even not for it's a very selfish process. I mean, I think creative process, and not egocentric but selfish, and the hope that next time it will be better. This is the idea of the mirage. That I mean, I think artists, we all have in mind the ideal piece of music, the ideal book, the ideal movie, somewhere in our mind. And we are trying desperately to get closer to this ideal we have in mind. It's like the guy who is doing a table, and he has in mind the ideal table as a design. And he will maybe spend all his life to try to get closer and closer to this ideal process. And recently I was doing electronica and oxygen, and I was thinking that I probably spent more time with machines and electronic instruments with human beings. And I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but it's a fact. And I think that creative process is an addiction. You don't do this even for pleasure, not for fame, not for money. You do it because it's not because you can't do anything else that some artists are saying. I think it's because you don't have the possibility to do it, because it's something like a kind of a mixture of excitement, jubilation, and the pain, in a sense. But it's, I'm not complaining because I think as artist I feel being very, very privileged, so I'm not complaining, I'm not whining. I'm just a day-to-day process in your thought, in your emotion, the way you say every morning it's a total excitement, jubilation, like being tonight. I mean, doing the concert here in Dusseldorf, and we'll talk about the importance of Dusseldorf in electronic music, but it's like being a beginner. Every day I try to be as fresh as possible to approach, for instance, the next concert tonight as my first concert. And it's the way it has to work, otherwise why doing things? I mean, as a musician, as an artist, I mean, the sharing process is so important. I mean, a concert like tonight, for instance, doesn't mean anything without you guys, without the audience. It's a very strange chemistry between two entities, the stage and the audience. And the result of a good concert is the combination. It's a teamwork, it's a collective work. It's not something solitary. In studio, it's much more solitary. I mean, partly for electronic music, you are like a writer or painter in your atelier, dealing with yourself. In a sense, it's maybe more difficult, I don't know, but it's definitely something different, and I think I need, and we need as musicians, and I need, don't want to talk for somebody else, but I need both.
You're talking like a psychologist. I'm very thankful because...
I try to compete, but it's very difficult.
Well, no, I'm very happy about it because you give insight into the process. As consumers, we listen just to the end product, and we like it or not, we are excited or not. But most of the time, we don't know enough, nor we really understand what is going behind the scene. And talking about creativity, did you ever experience a phase where you said, I don't feel the creativity, I don't feel the connection to my inner self and to the source of creativity?
All the time. I mean, it happened to me mid-August last summer, when I was in the middle of this Oxygen 3 album for, I said, why am I trapping myself in this kind of situation where just to explain you very briefly what happened. I was recording Electronica, this project involving lots of collaborators that you maybe have heard about, and I wrote the track during this process, and it was not obviously fitting the Solo Electronica project. And I said, if I had to do Oxygen today, I would probably start by a track like this, a piece of music like this, and then I kept that in the back of my mind somewhere. And then later on, the record company said, "Oh, next year we have the 40th anniversary of Oxygen. It would be good to do something, a box set and things like that." I said it could be a very good idea to use this. I'm not into anniversaries, to tell you the truth. It's strange because lots of my big projects have been involved with celebration of the city or the country, but to tell you the truth, I'm not that excited by anniversaries. I'm not into all this. But I used this 40th anniversary as a pretext, as a deadline to say to myself, what after this massive project of Electronica involving lots of people, lots of collaborators, lots of studios, lots of journeys and travels and all that, to go back to what I've done with the first Oxygen. It's actually I recorded this first album in 6 weeks with very minimalist equipment. I said it would be interesting after Electronica to lock myself in the studio for 6 weeks, because I have no other choice, because otherwise it will be the 41st anniversary, and what's the point? And then I trapped myself with the record company. I said, yes, I'm going to give you the final project in early September. And in the middle of August, to answer to your question, I was desperate, saying I should stop doing music and maybe doing paintings or something else, because it's going to be ridiculous, because I'm not ready. And then, step by step, in very mysterious ways, because I was against the wall, I ended with something that I'm, to tell you the truth, quite happy with, and quite faithful to, not a copy of the first one, but something which is faithful to the idea I had with this kind of piece of music. I mean, Oxygen is very special because it's like something which has one title, just parts like chapters, no titles per track, and it's like, I'm sorry because I'm sure that you have a question later on about this somewhere in this paper, you know. Sorry about that, you know, it's a digression, and we don't know where we go, you know, I don't know anyway.
But I like that, that's very intuitive and organic. You already raised one question that I would like to ask you. Looking back 40 years ago at Oxygen 1, which was, you know, very, as you said, you know, it was not extremely sophisticated, it was done in a very short time with so-called simple means compared to today. But what is the big difference? What is the trajet, the long journey that you took? If you compare this Oxygen at the beginning, would you change it? Would you do something differently with your ears, with your understanding? And was Oxygen 3 the result of this long journey?
No, I don't think so. I think that there is a kind of timeless element in Oxygen, like in lots of electronic music piece, and we'll certainly have a word about this a bit later. No, I won't change anything, and actually also for another reason, because I think when I finish something, in a certain sense, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the outside world, to the audience. You take it or not, and this is another story for me. And in no way I wanted to adjust with Oxygen 3 what I wouldn't have achieved with Oxygen, the first one. It was more a kind of taking the project like the cover is, it's just but slightly angled it in a different way, with a different perspective. What makes Oxygen interesting for me today is actually it was done in vinyl days, where everybody at that moment, we had in the back of our mind that we should do an album with 20 minutes for side 1, 20 minutes for side 2, because of technical reasons. And I remember very well that Oxygen has 6 parts, but for me it has two sides, and the darker side and the more luminous or brighter side. And it's what I did by instinct with Oxygen 3, by thinking about the vinyl in days where we have a big revival of vinyls, but it's not linked to this. It was more linked about the creative process. I always consider that Oxygen is a kind of dark and sunny project, a kind of oxymoron or paradox, audio-wise. And I conceived Oxygen 3 almost by instinct, the side 1 being quite dark, and side B-side or side 2 being more bright or more melodic. And I think it's faithful to what I like in music. I mean, this bridge between experimentation, exploring sounds, and melodies. I think we have something in common. We have lots of things in common between Germany and France. And but on a musical point of view, the importance of melody. We always thought that the melody is the most important thing in music, and this is what Oxygen is all about as well.
By the way, when will Oxygen 3?
Second, and what I like is, for instance, tonight I'm going to play an excerpt of the album, and it's the first time I do this, and it reminds me when I was a kid. I was really impressed by all these people, such as Elvis Presley or later on the Beatles. I mean, they were recording a track in one day, and they were the same night playing this track before it was even released as a single, as an album. And it's not existing anymore, that because of the internet. And then I decided that it could be cool to play some excerpts of the album before the album is out. And actually, I will actually do this whole tour in 2016, probably 50 gigs, 50 concerts, playing some music which is not still released. And I love this in days where everything is immediately in a kind of zapping mode. I mean, being to not pirating the system, but offering something different to people, sharing the life experience.
Good idea.
Well, this is going to be definitively a great evening, and this is a privilege tonight to be here in Dusseldorf with you.
It's a privilege for me, and I'm not saying this for just being polite. I just would like to make a slight comment about what you maybe were going to say. But you know, I
walk just.
No, just quickly, you know, we talked about my youth and the importance of some part of my family, like all of us. There is nothing extraordinary in all this. But my mother played a very important role in my life. My parents split up when I was 5 years old. My father is and used to be a great soundtrack composer, doing soundtracks such as Dr. Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia and lots of brilliant sound music. But I grew up totally far away from his influence. He moved to America, and I mean, soundtracks and soundtrack composers were not that in the spotlight in those days, much less than now. So it was quite abstract, and I've been raised by my mom. And my mom, as I was saying earlier on, was a great figure in the French resistance. She went into French resistance in 1941. She's been deported in a concentration camp in Ravensbrück and Mauthausen, and she survived. And I've been raised, and she taught me at a very early stage not making a big difference between an ideology and people. And in that time, after the Second World War, between Nazis and German people. And if I think back now, I mean, for people of our generation, I mean, after being born after the war, it was not that easy. And that gave me she gave me this kind of sense of tolerance and a true love for Germany. And at a very early stage, I went to Berlin because my cousin was in the French army in the kitchen for the French army.
Fighting for
yes, fighting for good food. It was challenging in those days. And then I've been in contact with Berlin and with Germany at a very early stage, and it has been one of my main source of inspiration in terms of philosophy, architecture, music, and the Bauhaus and Fritz Lang movies, and I mean, your country has been a major, and still is a major source of inspiration to me. And electronic music, to talk about this, actually has nothing to do with America, nothing to do with American pop, nothing to do with blues, jazz, or rock. It's something coming from our countries, from continental Europe, and mainly from Germany and France. And from Stockhausen on one side, and Varese, and Pierre Schaeffer, and then later on with Kraftwerk here, and Tangerine Dream, and people like me on the other side, and later on the Berlin School and techno school in Berlin, and people like Air, Daft Punk, and also people I worked with like Serious Mo today, I mean, or Rowan, or younger also actors. And if the continental Europe scene in electronic music is so important all over the world, it's because it's our DNA. It's coming from our heritage from classical music. And it's different from America. I remember one of a good friend, a great artist who has been last week here in Dusseldorf, John Fox, told me one day he gave me had to give me an award, I mean, a few years ago in London. He said something very interesting. He said, when I heard your music, you have to understand that as a young British kid, we had a feeling we were invaded by American music and American culture. And suddenly I heard Oxygen and probably also some other music from German artists. Suddenly I realized that something else, which has nothing to do with America, was typically European, and that made me, what gave me the idea and the energy to create Ultravox. I'm not saying this, it's not a comment about myself, but just to remind us that how our continental Europe culture, how important it is in the current music scene in 2016. I mean, we are too much thinking that American culture is actually is everywhere. I think our culture also and our sound, our music is also everywhere through electronic music.
Talking about electronic music, we need to talk a little bit about electricity. You said to me that it was very important for you to come here to this event, and tonight is the third night of this big conference. Why was it so special to come here? And why is it so special, this conference about electronic music?
Actually, what I just said is the beginning of an answer about to answer this question. I mean, the importance for me of Germany, of Dusseldorf, but even outside Dusseldorf, all Germany, I mean, is very important to me and to the world of electronic music. And this idea that you know, sometimes Germany. I love you. I love this country because you know you don't have the kind of arrogance that we have in France or in the UK, for instance. And sometimes this country doesn't realize enough what you have on a cultural point of view and the current culture today. I mean, electronic music is so important these days because it's, you know, like every movement. I mean, electronic music is everywhere. It is born in continental Europe, right? And you always have two sides in any kind of artistic movement, as we know. And you always have two sides in any kind of big artistic movement. The hedonist side, where actually we like to listen to music, to have fun, to dancing and moving until the end of the night. I mean, just having fun with music. But also you have also a social and political side of it. And it was obviously true for any kind of period for classical music, then for jazz, then for rock. Our future Nobel Prize of Literature is a very good example of protest songs and what folk music brought us in terms of political consciousness. And for electronic music today, it's the same thing. I mean, for one reason, we are surrounded by technology, by the internet, by big actors of the internet. I mean, the people and artists working in the electronic music field are the closest artists to this kind of technology because, I mean, by using internet as a day-to-day tool for creating what we do. And I think it's very important to use this for. And one example is, for instance, is the collaboration I've done with Edward Snowden. The idea that for Electronica too. I mean, the idea that technology is neutral, is like fission of atom. You can do the atomic bomb or creating lots of progress in biology or science, and depending on how you use technology. The same thing with the internet. And we have to ask ourselves all these questions. And I think artists are not politicians. Our job is not to make big statements on stage and transforming our stage into kind of political platform. But actually, in our music, I think it's very important also to share convictions, to share messages, just because through the experience we have on our day-to-day activity. And the example, for instance, of collaborating with Edward Snowden, who is a young guy saying not stop to technology, but be careful about the abuse of technology, is a very good example. And this is an example how also electronic music can create the link with the social or political context. And to go back to electricity and Dusseldorf, I think it's great that a city, I don't know the mayor of this city, but I think it's a very good move he had to help this kind of event happening, because actually we are talking about the roots of the city. I mean, the roots of the city is depending on culture. So many time I saw it all around the world, people saying, why spending money on a concert? Why spending money on an exhibition? Because we have school to build, but even if we don't have artists, if we don't have concerts, if we don't have exhibitions, we don't have schools. We will have nothing to teach in the future to kids. I mean, our culture is our identity, and it's what I like in Germany is this approach that lots of cities have, or lots of foundations, in a very remote, discreet way. I mean, to enhance and promote concepts such as electricity.
Well, you see, we could talk for hours, or I could listen for hours to the way you think,
please.
And the way you express yourself, and let us take part in your ideas. And it would be selfish to do it just on my own. I think that all of you were here also to maybe have the opportunity to ask a question. So before you will go on tour, you came from Frankfurt, Hamburg, Berlin. You are going to be on tour in Nuremberg and in Münster on the 19th and 21st of October, of November. Sorry. I would like to give you an opportunity to ask a few questions. Please, not too long, short, because some of you would like to ask. Please, the first one here.
Test. Hello. Welcome to Dusseldorf. It's a great honor for us to talk to you. How do you create music? When you have you a permanent idea of a melody, of music pattern, or do you have strict times? Now I'm working for music, or is it by chance?
It is by chance.
No, do you have vacation?
No, I think that it's a very mysterious question, that how a musical idea is born. I think it's strange, because I really envy some writers. I mean, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they every day they write 30 pages, and they are free after 11 o'clock in the morning to do other things. To do music eventually, yes, or anything else. How a musical idea is born. I really thought a lot about this, and I think I have the beginning of an answer. I think sometimes it's frustrating because you don't know when it's going to come, but how. I think it's a mixture of random elements. For instance, the conversation we have all together today, a bit of which is really more technical, like a kind of orchestration arrangement, like you would do it on a score by writing strings and woodwinds and things. But the origin of the sparkle of a musical idea, I think, is coming from this kind of random, mysterious elements that in the chemical process are going together.
Thank you very much. For the next question, please.
Hello. What other disciplines of art are you personally interested in besides music?
I need to be fed constantly with painting and video art. I love to go to any kind of art gallery and exhibition as much as I can. This is probably my main source of inspiration. I love, and partly these days where lots of people are saying, oh, the contemporary art at the moment nothing happens and all that. But that reminds me that in every decade everybody said that of the present. I mean, people, it's strange how we have no consciousness of how our present, the value of present. Nobody talks about what's going on now. We are very pessimistic animals. We are always saying, yesterday was better, tomorrow will be darker, and today is nothing, basically. And I think that you have so many great things. I mean, I'm very lucky to travel and to look at lots of different things. And you have so many good art installation, young artists and all that. So that's a very big source of inspiration for me. And movies also. I mean, I've always been involved and interested by movies because when electronic music started, you didn't have any models like for a young beginner today. I mean, a young beginner, young artist today, electronic music, I mean, I was going to say he's almost starting old because he has 40 years of quite heavy stuff behind him. So I would say movies and art, but also architecture, books. I mean, everything I can grab, really.
Thank you. Please, next one.
Hi, Jean-Michel. Just for the record, I did not vote for Brexit.
Okay, good.
Electronica 1, question about Electronica 1. One of my favourite tracks is Travel Later Part 2. What happened to Part 1?
And Part 3.
And Part 3?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, okay, for people who don't know what we are talking about, I mean, on Electronica 1, based on lots of different collaborations, on my wish list, Pete Townsend from The Who was one of the collaborators I wanted to work with. And I met with him and we became quite friends. He's an extraordinary human being, a great person, and a great artist, obviously. And I went with 3 demos, and he heard everything. He said, "Wow, yes, I'm interested, but why not doing a kind of small electronic rock opera?" So we went in and we said, "Okay, I'm going to be your lyricist if you want, your singer, and doing some bam, you know, the famous Pete Townsend riff." And then it what we did. And we ended with a kind of 15 minutes track. And in the context of electronica, I mean, collaborating with people linked directly or indirectly to electronic music, suddenly having the longest track of the album with Pete Townsend was strange. So we decided just to release Take 2 and to release later on the whole project as a standalone. It will be probably in 2017.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi.
Hi.
I want to talk about the creative process. You've been creating music for about 40 years, and I was wondering if you look back, so all these 40 years, if there was any events that would make you, for example, feel closer to, yes, this is it. Because in creative process, there's no end, and you always know you're getting a little bit closer, and you do one more step, and you realize, okay, this is where I want to go. I don't know where it's going to lead me, but that's where I want to go. And things just open up more. But was there any event or any time frame in your life when you were younger or something that just opened your chakras in a way and you're creating in a different light?
Yes, it's a very interesting question because it's what is probably even the most important question in life for an artist is how, as you said, how do you open your chakras and how is it happening, all this? I mean, what gives you the unconsciousness and the arrogance, in a sense, also to do something and feeling that it's going to be interesting for anyone? I think this is the wrong comment, because you don't do things for. It's a sharing process, but at the beginning it's an abstract sharing process, because you do things like a kind of therapy somehow. I'm talking to a psychologist now. And sometimes you have little stones on your path that actually create this kind of almost chemical reaction in your cells. For instance, I remember when I was 14 years old, I saw an exhibition from a French abstract painter called Pierre Soulages, and it was an absolute aesthetic shock. That's actually, I remember now that this moment was very short, but I saw, this artist, for people who don't know what he's doing, is dealing only with black. He's doing black, but with lots of lines, and he says that in black you have all colors because it's reflecting and it plays with reflection. And for me it was exactly what I had in mind for music, dealing with textures, with kind of optical illusion in music, what could be sonic or audio illusion. That is exactly an example of suddenly you meet something, you are in connection with some exhibition or movie. For instance, 2001: Space Odyssey for me has been a big shock, but also something that was so important for me to the importance of the relationship between music and visual. And so you have some stones like this. Which are building your identity as an artist or musician.
Well, thank you very much. And,
this man was trying to ask a question just from the beginning.
I just wanted to say, as I indicated before, it will be the last question, because I promised that we will end very sharp. And please.
Yeah, because I have a sound check to do to be able to try to do a decent sound tonight for you.
You all want to be happy tonight, right?
Okay, thank you very much, Jean-Michel. Just a question about the creation process of the new Oxygen 3 album compared with the first album. Was it much different experience for you, or how did you do it?
Actually, I tried to. I didn't listen to the first one, neither the second one at all. I just wanted to keep the feeling of it, and I was more interested not having a vintage approach by saying, okay, I'm going to because that could have been an idea. To use the same instruments, and I didn't want to do that, to be trapped by this kind of retro, nostalgic type of approach. But more, if I had to do Oxygen today, how I would approach this? Minimalist approach with few instruments. That was one principle, and the other one was to use, because we have the luxury to do it today. I was going to say old, not old, but analog. The first generation of analog synthesizers linked with also digital ones. I even used the sound of an iPad during this Oxygen 3 because I didn't want to trap myself with a kind of a model that would be ideal and I should copy it. So I didn't think about this at all, but just trying to, also something else was to, after electronica being very rhythmic with lots of drums and percussions, keeping the dogma of, or the principle of Oxygen where the percussions are just part of the element, but where the groove and all the beats, the rhythm is coming from sequences, melodies and pads, and also creating really a kind of soundscape where in days where we have a very interesting, and I finish by this quickly, but we have a very interesting new relationship with cultural content. We are in constant zapping mode on YouTube by picking, stealing informations and music and visuals, but also we are able with our partner to hardly sleeping over a weekend, not to watch 3 seasons of Game of Thrones or True Detective or House of Cards or whatever. So it means that there is a need somehow today also to have a different approach with music. Being able to listen to 40 minutes, 50 minutes of music like a track of 3 minutes. And it's what I tried to achieve with this Oxygen 3. It's a 40 minutes long album, 20 minutes per side or vinyl. And I hope that people will listen to it from A to Z because it's like a journey. It's like a journey and with actually dark and sunny moments, as I said.
Thank you very much, Jean-Michel. Thank you for being so responsive. And I would like to say
really thank you to the organizers of electricity und insbesondere an Rüdiger Esch. Wer mehr wissen will über die ganze elektronische Musik, dem empfehle ich wirklich ins Detail zu gehen. Das ist wirklich ein tolles Buch. Und vielen Dank, wir sehen uns ja heute Abend. Jean-Michel, merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being there. Thank you.